So Manet bridges the gap between realism and impressionism. So Manet is the guy that we've been looking at before. He did Olympia. There's good old Manet here. He did Olympia, he did Luncheon on the Grass. So he is really the guy who bridges the gap between realism and impressionism. Or rather, maybe we shouldn't say that he bridges the gap, but that he paves the way for modern art. Like Manet, the Impressionists were into exploring individual freedom, self-determinacy, and sensual pleasure. But unlike Manet, the Impressionists lacked any irony or guile. Impressionism was a French art movement which tried to use contemporary scientific research into the physics of color to achieve more exact representations of color and tone. Impressionists usually applied paint and small touches of pure color rather than broader blended strokes. This made pictures seem more dazzling, bright, and brighter. Impressionists are known for painting outdoors to catch the fleeting impressions of color and light. Before this, artists really didn't paint outdoors at all, but by the mid-19th century, this became commonplace. Impressionists strove for the individual experience. So they weren't into, like with history paintings are all about the universal. They're all about pulling people together through some sort of common universal event or belief. Impressionism is more about the self-experience. They're also not really into the passion of the Romantic period. They also create a new technique in painting. They reject chiaroscuro, or tenebrism, and they depict the interaction of light and color. They use equalizing brushstrokes across the surface of the canvas. And Impressionism is really a redefinition of the pictorial. And this is all based on Impressionist painters painted what the eye saw, not what the brain knew. So basically, when your eye looks at something, it sees a bunch of different colors. It just sees blurs and colors. And then your brain processes that, and it connects to things that it knows. And that's how you identify, oh, that's a house, or oh, that's a flower, because your brain kind of translates it for you. And so Impressionists were kind of taking out that, and they were just painting the colors they saw. So they were just painting what their eye saw. Impressionism as a movement was born in April of 1874 when a group of young artists in Paris who were frustrated with the exclusion of their work from the official salons joined together to hold their own exhibition. There's about 30 painters, including some of the ones that you read about in your book, such as Claude Monet, Renoir, Degas, Camille Pissarro, and Paul Cézanne. Most of this exhibit, this exhibit did get some positive reviews, but it was attacked by conservative critics. For the most part, these artists were working outside of the salon, so they were not adhering to the salon's requirements. Remember, at this time, the salon is really still big into history paintings. Now, if you don't remember any other Impressionist painter from this class, please remember Claude Monet. He really is the Impressionist painter. He's the most influential, and his legacy still carries on today as this kind of father of Impressionism. He was born in Paris, but he was raised outside of the city. He came from a lower middle class family, and he actually had to paint for a living. So this kind of marks him differently than some of the other artists who had wealthy families to support him or them. He actually had to paint to make a living. He trained briefly with an academic teacher, and then he left the studio for the outdoors. Now Manet, who we talked about before, he was a real intellectual. But Monet, who we're talking about right now, I know their names are very similar, so it's kind of confusing. But Monet, who's the Impressionist guy that we're talking about right now, he wasn't so much of an intellect. He was really into light and color. He rejected figural painting because he thought it distracted from the natural world. He painted landscapes and city views. He never used black, so he claims, because he believes that light is key. He replicated his sensory perceptions, and of course he usually painted outdoors. He began to develop his own technique of painting with strokes and touches of pure color. He used this mainly to depict flowers, leaves, and waves. Now, he was a little extreme. He once said that he wished he had been born blind and then suddenly regained his sight so he could have begun to paint in this way without knowing the objects that he saw before him. So a little bit extreme there. Monet really launched into his Impressionist style in the 1870s and 1880s, and he did have tons of followers. Monet and other Impressionists, their goal was to capture an instantaneous impression of a scene in nature. This is Monet's impression, Sunrise, from 1872. It is from this painting that the Impressionists actually got their name. We can see in this image we have a very sketch-like quality to the work. You really can see how he applies paint. He has these solid colors in these thick brushstrokes. He really shows his interest in atmosphere here. So he's not just painting the sky, but he's painting almost like these layers of clouds in the sky, these different impressions of light reflecting into the clouds. He really enjoyed color and lighting effects, especially in water. So in a lot of his works, he'll have water depicted in his landscapes so that he can kind of manipulate or reflect on the combination of water and light. So for example, here is like the sunrise here, and you can see the sun's reflection here in the water. Just, I think that's really gorgeously done, and you can kind of see it here in the clouds as well. Here he's depicting the early morning hours across this lake or river with mist across the river. So you can see that this is kind of the misty fog sort of covering. And you do actually get some sense of shape here. So we have a boat with some people in it. So he is using a little bit of figure art, but you can see it's really broken down into, here's another boat and another one over here, but really broken down into very basic forms. And not even forms, just kind of like brush strokes. But he's still paying attention to detail. So we have this figure who can barely make out as a figure, but I think you can understand that that's a figure, and here's his boat. And then you look, you can actually see the reflection in the water. Same thing here. And here you can also see the reflection of these buildings and smokestacks here in the river as well. He actually uses these very broad brushstrokes, like I mentioned, of pure color. You can really see that in there and indeed right through here as well. He mixes the paint on the canvas. So we see that especially in this kind of pink and white combination up here. And I'll just show you a few more of his artworks real quick. Some of them are more figural than others.